I'm Carrie Lake with a look at your Fox 10 Facebook news update. A huge traffic backup in the East Valley after a crash involving a Mesa police transport van and a flatbed truck. The wreck happening on the westbound lane of the US 60 near Loop 101. More than Fox 10 Facebook news update. A huge traffic backup in the East Valley after a crash involving a suspect arrested in 4 of the I-10 freeway shootings is formally charged today with 16 counts. 21-year-old Leslie Merritt Jr. is not facing terrorism charges because Arizona's terrorism laws don't apply in this case. Investigators say ballistics testing shows Merritt's gun was used in 4 of the 11 freeway shootings. He has maintained his innocence. Several people, including a toddler and a firefighter, are stung multiple times by a huge swarm of bees in Gilbert. The hive discovered at a home near Pecos and Gilbert. Those who were attacked last night were treated for their injuries. Temperatures below the 100-degree mark on the first day of fall here in the valley, but it's going to feel like summer the rest of the week. High humidity and a high temperature about 105 over the next few days. Be sure to send us your news and weather, photos and videos using the hashtag Fox10Phoenix. I'm Carrie Lake. Have a great day.
Hi everyone, welcome to Fox 10 News Now.
Hey, there's Richard Sines.
Oh wow, isn't he good looking?
Our in-studio audience.
Yeah. I'm here with Jude LaCava, and what a special way to start the show. Oh, it gets better.
I want to be just like Jude LaCava when I grow up. That's what I want to be like this guy when I grow up.
How about that? A live appearance here by Richard Sines.
When I grow up, by Richard Sines. Well, I always love talking to you, but you and I had an interesting conversation earlier about the Pope being in the country, and I thought I need my expert here.
Well,
we go back all the time about your Catholic school days. I need my expert.
You know, I was raised Catholic,
Yes.
and I think it's really interesting because when you go back to my relatives that came from Italy, Roman Catholic. Especially the grandparents, when you mention the Pope, it's special. I mean, the room stops, and there's such reverence, and it's kind of old school. And then when you mention the Pope today, and certainly Pope Francis has changed the conversation in a lot of positive ways, but there's also been a lot that's happened in the church. But I haven't been raised Catholic, and actually a choir boy at one point.
Weren't you a saint? Is that
no,
what they...
No, I was. If anything, I was, a heathen in grade school. Raided the altar wine, which again, this is like a confession.
This is.
But
we're in
8 years. Can you imagine?
It's about the size of a confessional.
It is. In the time you have to really go through every detail. A lot of guilt, but no. 1st through 8th grade in Catholic grade school, and you don't forget those early years. But I also attended St. Joseph's University, which is a Jesuit university, and as many people know, Pope Francis is a Jesuit, the first Jesuit Pope in the history of the Church. And I find that kind of fascinating because the Jesuits are really kind of the progressives, and they've been the progressives. And
right.
I think what I find fascinating is that they've needed somebody to change the conversation, address some of these critical issues, and they decide to get nominate and of course appoint a Jesuit Pope, and he has been a really kind of a grassroots guy. I mean, Italian
taking
roots.
Selfies with people.
Taking selfies,
yeah.
drives he's
using
in the back of a Fiat.
They're using a hashtag.
He was a bouncer growing up in South America. He was a young man who enjoyed the tango, and then had this revelation that he would join the priesthood. But most of the Jesuits that I've been around through the years were really the more progressive. They questioned the church themselves, and they were always looking. They were kind of the outsiders, but always the educators, the intellects. They were the ones that established a lot of the top universities, the Loyola universities of the world, and from Boston College to St. Joe's. Extremely. You never wanted to get into a debate with the Jesuit priests because they were so well schooled. They could argue pro and con, and were very progressive against the standard Dominicans or Franciscans and priests that were more traditional, so to speak. So this is a different era for the Roman Catholic Church.
I haven't seen, and maybe it's because I wasn't looking for it, and I know the last Pope, was it 2008? the last Pope came? And it wasn't the last Pope, it was...
Well, you had John Paul II, who had passed, and then you had Ratzinger, who took over, and that was kind of somewhat of he was abridged really to Pope Francis, and for the first time in the history of the church, you've had two living popes. I mean, Ratzinger basically retired and stepped aside for Pope Francis, and I think Ratzinger was considered a conservative, somebody that followed canon law to the T, where Pope Francis immediately came in and it's made some comments about women in the church, about gays in the church.
Global warming?
Yes, global warming, climate change, women's rights. He has been, very much carrying the banner for the poor, and somebody that's a little bit unpredictable. And I think a lot of people that have been on the outskirts of the Catholic religion have said, hey, this guy's at least entering in the conversation, allowing us to get back into some type of respect. Because, I mean, the elephant in the room for the last 15 years has been the sex scandal. And that was a tremendous blow to the institution of the Roman Catholic Church and the way it was handled. And I think Francis has apologized. He's even had meetings with some of the victims, and he has said never again. But there's an outpouring of affection for this guy, and on his very first visit to the States.
That's
you were raised Catholic, were you not? Or?
Oh, I'm a Southern Baptist, but...
Well, I won't hold that against you.
I know, don't hold that against me. But
we're all inclusive here.
What I was going to say is that I've never seen such an outpouring. The people, to me, it's almost as if he's a rock star in regards to the way people react to him. I loved watching him embrace that little girl and kiss her today.
That was special.
That was such a sweet moment. But to me, I've not seen in my lifetime, and again, maybe it's because I have not been looking for it, or perhaps it's because it hasn't even existed, but there was such excitement. There is such excitement about him being here, and I believe he does provide a lot of people with hope. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at the Latin American countries, South America, and the third world countries, the impact he's having is significant. I think when you look at the state of the Catholic Church in America today, it's in a crisis mode. There's a number of churches that have closed down. When you look at some of the old school dioceses in places like Chicago and Cleveland and Detroit, some of the Rust Belt cities, they're literally closing down parishes, and the numbers have gone down in terms of the parishioners. So his papacy is coming at the right time to try to re-encourage the flock, so to speak, to come back. New energy and a new approach, and a very humble, very, very humble approach.
Yeah, he doesn't wear the red shoes. He wears his own shoes.
That's right, and isn't a Fiat. I mean, I think that's kind of classic. I mean,
I'm more of a Volkswagen Bug girl myself, but
I'd say, it's all about miles per gallon. You gotta like that about the Pope. But it's interesting to see. I mean, I think there's still there's some skeptics out there that are former Catholics that may never come back based on the last 15 years or so of what happened, and we all know that scandal was unforgivable for many. Mm-hmm. But I think the one thing that he did immediately, right up your alley, he opened up a Twitter account, started tweeting, and he created an instant likability. Hey, I like that guy. He's out. He's kind of impromptu. Sometimes he'll dash out into the crowd, and just connect with people.
I've got great video that I'll show you guys later. Hi, Bronwyn. I've got great video that I'll show everyone later. Of he's walking. He's trying to walk through a crowd, and you see his security guards swatting people's hands away, and he will break through his security guards and go and take people's hands and love on them, and I just think that that's so sweet.
A Pope of the people, as they say. And I don't know if you've ever had a chance to visit the Vatican. I was lucky enough to go there a couple of times. It's such a unique experience, not just for the pizza, and there's really great Italian food around the Vatican. There's so many great spots, but it's it's almost like, can you imagine the greatest masterpieces of art?
Well, you're sitting next to one.
And
so.
yes, and the overload. I mean, everywhere you look, when you walk through the Sistine Chapel, when you walk through.
Do you remember when Justin Bieber called it the 16th Chapel on Letterman?
That's hilarious.
Wasn't one
stuff.
of his brightest moments.
No, that was not very well educated there. But it's a masterpiece of art overload, and it overwhelms you when you see the Pietà. When you look at it is overwhelming and inspiring, even if you're not a Catholic. You're like, yeah, man, this is just. I mean, there's a Michelangelo, there's a there's a Raphael, there's another. It's an amazing experience. You have to go there,
jealous.
and I'll give you a couple of spots, late night spots, because I know you're going to want to.
I like to party.
Yeah, partying in Rome, but no, it's special. I think that the Catholic University it's the largest Catholic church in America, and I think it's the Church of the Immaculate Conception, and that's where he conducted his Mass today. Although I did see, with all due respect, I did see the Pope nodding off a bit. I don't know if you caught that.
I didn't. I'll have to revisit.
If the nuns caught, if you were nodding off in Mass, that was a no-no. And the other part
was that a slap on the hand?
It was even worse than that. Craig Bianchini and I, we used to skip Mass. We would come in. We were the last bus coming in at St. Catherine's, and we would hide back in the closet, and everybody else would have to go to Mass, and then we would run the halls, and the nuns, they caught us, and it was just, a massacre. I mean, we were really just, you put the hands out the ruler, the whole bit.
Oh, no.
Catholic school memories.
But it made you a good person. Look at this.
I don't know about that. No, I think it created some kind of, person that holds just about every piece of authority and contempt, but that's a whole other story. But no, I think it's pretty cool. I mean, I just have this feeling that the Pope really connects in a lot of third world countries and a lot of folks that have traditional Catholic history. When you go to Brazil, when you go to Argentina, when you look at Italy and France. Although, what I will tell you this, the Italians are respectful of the Pope. Mm-hmm. But when you see them party and you realize, you see the different rather promiscuous ads and lifestyle, there's a great contradiction in Italy. As much as there's reverence, there's also the Italian lifestyle. So there's a series of contradictions. But I just want to see where he can take this. How aggressive will he be, like with climate change? Mm-hmm. We have one of our fine representatives, Paul Gosar, who opted not to be part of, I guess, the congressional meeting. But, he's thrown himself into some really hot-button issues.
Right.
I mean, whether you're a conservative or whether you believe in climate change, he's saying, look, we need to do something there.
I thought that this was interesting. Bronwyn said, I am Catholic and I love this Pope, and a lot of my non-Catholic friends also love him.
Boy, that's right on. I think a lot of people feel that way. Very likable, and his humility is very powerful, and it connects with people. And that's the way he's come across. I think Ratzinger, the previous Pope, that kind of was the bridge from John Paul II, was a little bit right by the numbers, right by the canon law, and now this Pope, I think, is like, hey, let's get down to basics. But I'll contend that it's his Jesuit training. I mean, these guys are they're realists, they're progressives. They've had a long history of challenging the church and a long history of addressing certain issues. So he's an extremely intelligent man. Obviously, he has a chance to rally the church, and I think it's just curious to see how he approaches these issues.
Tell me if this is a silly question. What do you think some of these political candidates that want to be our president, that are running for during the 2016 campaign, what do you think they could learn from him? Because it's like Bronwyn said, he's a very likable character to not only her, who is Catholic, but to her friends that are non-Catholic. How can some of these presidential candidates go beyond their party touch?
I think that...
I know it's completely different, and I know we should never talk politics and religion, but here we are on Fox 10 News now.
There's a time and place, and this is the time and the place, and I look at, how about connecting with the forgotten folks that are really struggling out there? The folks that are going paycheck to paycheck, the single moms, the folks that are living not far down the street here at the Salvation Army facility that are trying to figure out how to get their kids to school. I mean, I'm talking about people that are really struggling and are trying to exist and trying to feed their families and trying to get their kids to the right schools. I think I'd like to see more of the candidates connect with the folks we don't hear enough about that are really having a tough time, that need a humble, real person to go in there and say, look, I've got a plan that's going to help. I got a program that's going to assist. I think humility would be the trait you would want some of these candidates to inherit immediately, and just say, look.
Versus Donald Trump. I'm rich.
Versus, well, yeah, and I think, well, versus the fact that everybody looks at the polling and the data, and they say, I need this demo.
Right.
I need this group. I need this voting block. I
Give
need
me
the Catholic
some sound
share.
bites that are going to
Yes.
attract this guy.
Right. Let me say the right thing so I can recruit this voting block, as opposed to let me just be real and address the issues in this country today. And whether it be immigration, whether it be folks that are just struggling, that have been in this country a long time, that are trying to figure out how to get to next month's rent. I want to see the candidates get into the neighborhoods and the town halls that really have viable programs that are going to help people that are really in dire straits. Not the upper 1%, not the 1%ers, but a good portion of the middle class. Because I think this Pope is kind of connected on that level. It's he's been very real with women's rights too. And I think one of the big issues with the church, Kinsey, is that why can't we see a more prominent place for women? Women in the priesthood has been an issue, and he's danced around it in a good way a little bit, to a point where he wants to kind of test the waters. Could we see change? I know some traditionalists are going to be like, say, LaCava, you're crazy. But could we see him carry the banner for females becoming priests?
Wow. And
conducting Mass? And, is that something that's going to be on the agenda over the next 5 years?
Do you think people would rather see him being the face of something like that versus climate change?
I think they want a lot of issues addressed. They want compassion for refugees. They want a world to come together to those that are in dire straits, like this horrific immigration issue that's been coming out of Syria and going into Eastern Europe and Germany. I think they want somebody that's going to address the reality of the issues that are out there globally, like climate change. But I also think that they want a certain degree of acceptance. I think that you have a very strong Christian base that has very strong feelings about marriage.
Right.
And I think what's interesting about this Pope, and he said this maybe a little over a year ago, he didn't come right out and say it, but he also encouraged people to be less judgmental and more accepting. Mm-hmm. That if it's kind of the humanity of it all. You accept people for what they are and respect them. And so he kind of middled the conversation, I think, in a positive way. And I'm not going left or right on this, but I'm just saying I think he was very diplomatic and still
in the way he handled
it. And I have to say that these are delicate issues that absolutely divide people in this country.
Yes.
But maybe unite people a little bit more globally. And I'm curious to see what he has to say about the female role in the church, and also what is he going to do to those Catholics that have been fed up with the way the church has maybe not addressed some of these key issues. And I think one of the things that there's a shortage of priests. The question is the screening process is effective? What are they doing to? I've always felt that one of the really, it's a sensitive issue, and I'm going to bring it up, but I feel strongly about it, and it's this. Mm-hmm. If you know a priest has been an abuser, what culpability did the church have to also reel in that priest and seek justice? And I never thought that at least the previous popes did enough in that regard. that you were an offender. We proved that you were an offender.
How did they handle it? Was it
well, it was
out
a
of
shell
sight, out
game.
of mind?
It was a shell
like,
game.
Let's just not talk about it, and maybe it'll go away.
Very much so, and it was and most of the journalists that covered the story realized it was a shell game. So a priest would be moved from one diocese across the country, let's say in Boston, moved to Phoenix. They would literally move these priests around, and I think the institution of the Catholic Church used, protected some of these offenders in so many different ways, in hundreds of cases, not only in the States, in Ireland, in other countries. And I think that bothered me from a standpoint that once they knew, and they knew of these types of things, why weren't they more aggressive in getting these culprits and bringing them to justice? So I want to see the screening process, the vetting process better. I think for the church to be more effective, they have to engage more lay people as deacons or assisting priests to really revive the church.
As familiar as I was with the scandal too, I don't associate this pope with it in any way, shape, or form. He has, I guess, and this is probably his objective, is that he's gone so. Bye, Mike.
See you guys.
We heart you.
See you, Mike.
He's gone so above and beyond, branding himself as something completely unassociated. In no way, shape, or form do I think of those scandals when I think of him.
Sure.
And I think of his religion.
Well, I think you're right, and I think that from Pope John Paul II to Pope for Bishop Ratzinger, I always call him Ratzinger because I think he was a bridge. He was the insulation of the couple of years before they got to Pope Francis that was still very much part of the past, and Pope Francis has come in with kind of a clean slate and saying, look, this is a Jesuit priest. Jesuit's never been a pope, from Argentina, who has addressed a lot of the third world issues that's now pope. And you're right. I mean, I think he's come in very apologetic, very open. He hasn't shied away from any of the questions or controversy. He's even, what I find fascinating is I think he's even realigned the way they do business at the Vatican Bank in Rome, which was really a major, when you look at properties and real estate and holdings throughout the world, the Catholic Church is quite prominent. But I think the way they do business is a little bit different as well. And I think the fact that he's come here in his very first speech, and he goes right to climate change, tells you that he's not afraid to mix it up and get into some of the issues.
Well, in regards to not passing a judgment, I hope Ty Brennan is listening, because I like my outfit today, Ty Brennan. Drops mic.
Do you have a lot of Catholics viewing your show right now?
I don't think that we have a lot. I know we have a few. I know that we at least...
Do we have any baseball fans?
I know we at least had Bronwyn, so we at least have one. I think Frankie considers himself Buddhist. Rachel is practicing...
He's a practicing Buddhist.
No, but Rachel is, I believe Rachel's studying the Muslim faith. So we've got people from all walks of life in our
to see
chat
what
room.
they have to say about that. But
Also, thank you, Rachel, for my comment, or the comment on my hair. Hi, Rachel.
I have to say one thing, because I would really be remiss if I didn't.
missed you too. Thank you, Jude.
I missed you, Kinsey. I'm not sure if you were on sabbatical or maybe
I was in Tent City
on a nice little pilgrimage. But Yogi
That was a
Berra,
joke.
one of the great personalities in the history of sport, passed away last night. Yogi Berra.
Yes.
And
you actually had the pleasure of sitting down with him.
Yes, on our
But do you mind
our
if
Twitter
I
handle.
let
Sure,
me-
you can pull it up.
I'll
if you
pull it
like.
up because I just.
He was just absolutely a kick, and you can see this brief clip here.
Is this something I can show on air?
You sure can. Yep.
Even though that's not our station.
No, that is. That's
Oh,
the
you're
old. Believe it
kidding.
or not,
That's
that's
our
the
old
old channel. That was
microphone?
20 years ago when we were another affiliate, CBS actually. And there's Yogi.
Wow, you've been here a while, Jude.
Some say way too long.
All right, I'll start it from the beginning.
And this is Yogi Berra. This was about 20 years ago, believe it or not.
Guess how old I was?
You were not on this earth at that time, right?
I was
you were
10.
My goodness. Well, here you go. And he explains one of his yogiisms, and you've heard it. It's not over until it's over.
Did he inspire that song, Baby It Ain't Over Till It's Over?
Yes.
Aw.
We say them in news, we say them in sports. How did that whole philosophy develop for you? I don't know how many times I can count on my hand a day. It's not over till it's over, whether it's a news department meeting or something in sports.
I think Catfish could tell you, but I don't even know I say him. I know it. I really don't. Because I used to go to breakfast with Jim all the time. And if I come up with something, somebody say, hey, Yogi, you said another one. I don't even know what I said. I mean, the truth. And that, I said that ain't over till it's over when I was managing the Mets in '73. We were in last place. And we had to play the teams we had to beat, and we weren't that far out. We were only about 6 games out. I said, we're playing the teams we got to beat, so it ain't over till it's over. We won the pennant.
Say it again.
What?
There were so many great
yogiisms. Like, for instance, I think his wife once asked him, so where do you want to be buried? And his response was, surprise me. I mean, it's like... they don't. He just had a unique way. Like, did he just say that, or is it really one of the most brilliant insights about something?
Are you crazy or are you hilarious?
Crazy? Yeah, and he was the ultimate with that. I mean, he had one line after another, and and oh, by the way, he was a phenomenal, maybe the second or third greatest catcher ever in the history of the game, and he was 5'7", about 185 pounds, and he was a world champion 10 times as a New York Yankee.
If he were, if he would have been introduced to this earth a little later, he would have started.
Oh, man,
can you imagine
he hot on Twitter?
On Twitter, he would have had his own reality
Twitter,
show.
Yes.
So,
he was absolutely hilarious, and he would say things, and you'd have to did he just say that? What was that? What does that mean?
Can you imagine the kind of voicemails he left for people?
Oh gosh, hilarious guy, and he was very, very good friends with a legendary broadcaster who is here, Joe Garagiola. They grew up. It's a fascinating story, kids. Listen to this. They grew up on the same street in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. They both went on to play in the big leagues. Yogi became a Hall of Famer. Joe became a Hall of Famer broadcaster. Also played in World Series, and they lived right on the same street. And they were so close. And I feel for Joe Garagiola tonight because he lost one of his best friends.
Does he have a Twitter?
I don't know if Joe's on Twitter, but I know that Yogi would have owned Twitter in a big-time way because he was a special personality. There's very few athletes that change the language of American culture.
Yeah.
And he did. I mean, people will repeat Yogiisms forever. It's
I don't
never
know what
over
it,
till
what
it's
it
over.
was the. I don't know
that
what
that could come down to maybe your relationship with a gentleman. It's never over till it's over. It could come down to
when Olive Garden had that unlimited pasta.
Yes, it could apply to a lot of things. These yogiisms.
Yeah, they could. I don't know what the exact database is, but I guess he was the most in an actual
Most
database
quoted.
of quotes. He's the
believe it.
most quoted individual.
Just great stuff.
I tend to quote Cookie from Empire, which premieres tonight on Fox 10.
Cookie, an up-and-comer.
Yeah, she's going to be next.
Yeah, so it's that was a real
Well, yeah, I'm
loss.
really glad that you got to have that moment with them. I know when things like this, when people pass that are special, and you remember and you have that, you realize that you actually got to sit down and spend time with them, it does affect you a little bit more when those people pass.
You have that moment. I mean, a few weeks ago,
that's kind of an
we had that
obnoxiously
little,
late thing to say, but
you have that little
Gary
snippet we had of
Coleman.
Gary Coleman, and what's my favorite yogiism? I actually like it's not over till it's over, because you can apply it to so many things in life. Maybe it wasn't as funny but it's very profound. Because you can use it so many different ways. Yeah, here you go, back to Gary. But
Come on, man.
yeah, I just there's very few.
why are we
athletes.
looking at the Capitol? Here we go.
Very few athletes ever changed the language, and Yogi did. And
How's it going?
that's and one of those guys that if you walked in, you'd go, well, gee. You mean to tell me he was one of the most dominant catchers in the history of baseball? And, you know, I mean, even when he was an older gentleman.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a very unassuming, kind of like that crazy uncle that shows up at Thanksgiving and you go, okay, you know, I got, you know, I'll give you a turkey sandwich or something, and you're laughing, you know, for the next, like, 2 hours you're laughing your tail off.
I've been told within
Jude
the
had
last...
brown hair.
Within the last week, I was told I do a terrible impersonation of you. I don't even remember. I don't even remember what I was saying, but it was to Kobe, and Kobe was like, "That is honestly the worst Jude LaCava impression I've ever heard."
Here's one here. You better cut the pizza into 4 pieces because I'm not hungry enough to eat 6. That's a great. Your favorite Yogiism. Yeah.
Do you have one? Can you think?
That's one of them right there. I like them all. I think he was one of the most profound characters with the greatest sense of humor that we've ever seen in sports, and I love the guy. And you're right. That's a moment I'll never forget.
Since we have you here, give us a recap. What's going on with the Cardinals? I saw you posting about the Diamondbacks on Twitter.
Yeah, D-backs were, they've been eliminated from the playoffs, but they're trying to finish the season strong. 2 more weeks left. The Cardinals are just absolutely owning the town. I mean, the place is going crazy. They played the Niners, big rivalry Sunday, and we're going to have more from Carson Palmer, Bruce Arians tonight.
Oh.
And Richard was out there practice today. So we're ramping up for Sunday, and the game's on our air, and we've got post-game coverage, and this team could now go to 3-0. So,
what do you think? What did you think about Sunday's game?
Very impressive. I mean, they were a little bit sloppy in the first half, but
isn't that what we're noticing so far?
Yeah, I just think that they do a few things really well, especially in the passing game, and they force turnovers early on. And Carson Palmer is having a great start to the season.
Yeah.
And when you have a quarterback that's red hot, you're going to win games right now. So I suspect, I'm very confident that they win on Sunday and beat the Niners. I just think they're a better team. And this is going to be like a, trending upward, to use a Twitter the term here. This thing is going to keep rolling and rolling as long as Carson Palmer stays healthy. Yes.
Well, let me state for the record that I've been a fan for at least 5 games now. So when they're like
You're
at the Super Bowl,
I'm impressed.
no one can be like, she's just on the bandwagon now because
we're sending you to Santa Clara with news now.
I'm probably already going to be there.
Super Bowl 50. Wow.
I'm just
50th
kidding.
anniversary. Wouldn't that be something? No, hey, look, they're red hot. ASU's got USC coming up Saturday night. That's a big game for the Sun Devils. And anytime the Trojans come to town, Trojan man, Cody Kessler. So we'll see.
I would hate that to be my nickname, honestly. I'd be like, call me something else.
I just threw that in there. But no, USC and ASU Saturday and UCLA Arizona. So, I mean, it's a really big, we're approaching
You're busy.
The red hot.
You are busy.
It is red hot football
I can't believe
season.
I'm getting this exclusive with you.
Yeah, and the old history of the choir boy. My God. Jeez. And I say that respectfully.
Well, I know I was going to say, I can't
Elephant.
believe you just dropped the G word.
Yeah, no,
You're too fun, Jude. Jude, who do you think will win the NASCAR championship now that the chase has been announced?
Boy, I'll tell you what. I still think that when you get right down to it, it's kind of wide open right now. I thought that Harvick was going to be the guy to kind of run away for this because he had such a hot start to the season, but he had a horrible race over the weekend. I think it's kind of wide open yet. I think 3 or 4 drivers could win it. I'd keep tabs on Junior. I'd also keep tabs on Jimmy Johnson, but too many more races to come to predict right now.
Is there any sport you can't stay connected to because you're overwhelmed with what's currently going on, or do you have your fingers
Frisbee
and toes
golf.
and
I
everything?
am not up on
Oh, well,
Frisbee
good.
golf. That's
Lucky
something
you.
out of my...
I'm an expert in Frisbee golf,
See, there
so
you
I'll
go.
keep you updated whenever you have any questions.
Yeah, we got to do a story on that sometime.
Yeah, it'll just be me trying it and failing
No, we got to do
miserably.
that. I want to get some video on that. Kinsey
No
playing
one wants
Frisbee
to see
golf.
that. It'll be funnier
Bowling. No, not bowling, but
Yeah.
I digress.
I digress. I love when you say that. Maybe
there
I
you
can
go.
do a good I digress. Maybe then I don't have the worst impression of you. I digress. No, it's still not good. I just make
I
you sound
digress.
very
I digress.
New York, I guess, and you're not New
I'm
York.
not more Eastern Pennsylvania with a pinch of Ohio.
Ugh.
Cleveland.
I need to do
Whatever
some
that
homework.
sounds like, yeah.
Well, I greatly appreciate you
You got
spending
it.
some time with me. It's not every day I get a celebrity next to me.
Anytime.
A Catholic celebrity.
Did you want me to hear your confession on the air, or that's for the midnight show?
Midnight show.
Yeah, I'll get my collar and it'll take a long time, by the way.
Yeah, just go ahead and wear your slippers. We're going all night. Now let me see. I've got some stories here that I pulled for you. By the way, I missed you guys too. Thank you so much for your sweet messages in the chat room. I sure did miss you too. Let me readjust here now that I don't have my friend Jude sitting next to me. I'm going to change my lower third. There we go. Let's check out some of our Wednesday stories. I have a lot of just generic footage from his visit to the United States, but let's see if I can find an actual package put together for you, likely by Fox National, our Fox National colleagues. Luzader always gives us good stuff. Let's check this out. This is in regards to the Pope's first visit to the United States.
This is going to be a very busy day here at the White House. The administration expecting perhaps 15,000 people for the Pope's visit, which will include a relatively lengthy sit-down between the president and the pontiff. Pope Francis stepping off of his plane from Cuba at Andrews Air Force Base, greeted by President Obama and the First Lady. The planeside welcome is a rare courtesy extended to a pope who has generated excitement around the world. And keeping true to his humble image, the Pope drove around Washington in a tiny Fiat. His stop at the White House this morning billed by the administration as a meeting of like-minded leaders.
This is an opportunity for two men who have so many values in common to talk about the efforts that they are taking in their respective and quite different roles to advance those shared values.
And while the Pope suggested to reporters on his plane that he is not necessarily left-leaning, he is expected to push for action on climate change, immigration reform, and income inequality. And while a polarized Congress debates hot-button issues like abortion and the environment, it's worth noting that this Pope can be difficult to pin down.
The Pope is kind of an equal opportunity pleaser and offender. He'll say things that people on the progressive side of the agenda don't like. I think he's much more with the conservatives in the church on issues such as pro-life issues and even gay marriage than I think is popularly imagined. So you don't want to take too much for granted here.
House Speaker John Boehner sent out a video of what the Pope will see tomorrow as he addresses tens of thousands on the National Mall. Just one of the stops that make this visit an immense security challenge.
Unprecedented in terms of the scope, scale, and size, being in 3 cities. So starting here in Washington, D.C., and then moving to New York City, and then Philadelphia.
The Pope is going to spend most of the morning here at the White House. From there, he moves on to a papal parade through Washington. And for folks who don't have tickets to some of these events, that's about the best opportunity to catch a glimpse of the Pope. In Washington, Doug Luzader, Fox News.
January 1919, shortly after the end of World War I, President Woodrow Wilson met Benedict XV, marking the first time a sitting U.S. president sat down with a pope. And it wouldn't happen again for another 4 decades when Eisenhower shook hands with the Holy Father, John the 23rd. In the summer of '63, John F. Kennedy, the first Catholic president, was greeted by a newly elected Pope, Paul VI. All these visits taking place in Vatican City until 1965 when the Bishop of Rome flew to the eastern seaboard. Pope Paul had a meet and greet with Lyndon B. Johnson in a New York City hotel. The Holy Father would go on to meet with President Richard Nixon twice and his successor, Gerald Ford, once. By the late 70s, there was a new leader of the church, John Paul II. In the fall of '79, he made history, becoming the first pontiff to go to the White House, the invitation extended by Jimmy Carter, a devout Christian. In 1981, the Oval Office changed hands. During his 8 years in office, President Ronald Reagan huddled with His Holiness 4 times, their friendship widely viewed as a force in the fight against communism. The wildly popular Pope continued his warm relationship with America's chief executives. meeting twice with George H.W. Bush, 4 times with Bill Clinton, and 3 times with George W. Bush. The 2005 death of John Paul II paved the way for the papacy of Benedict XVI. Bush 43 traveled to Italy to see him, and when the Pope came to the U.S. in 2008, he was feted on the White House South Lawn. Less than 6 months into his first term, President Obama entered the walls of the Vatican to meet Benedict. He made his second trip there last year, this time meeting a new leader of the Holy See, Papa Francesco. The White House says President Obama will greet Pope Francis at Joint Base Andrews, a rare thing for any president to do. The Holy Father's official welcoming ceremony will be the following day here at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. At the White House, Joel Waldman, Fox News.
We are definitely expecting a whole lot of people. We're expecting anywhere from 20 to 25,000 people. So we're definitely prepped and ready for it, but it will be very busy. There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
From Pope sandwiches to Vatican pizza, even papal beer, local businesses are getting caught up in the excitement over the Pope's upcoming visit.
Brookland Pint is serving up religious beers like the Double Barrel Jesus.
It's very good, very chocolatey, very dark, very stout.
We're going to have about 20 drafts, all religious themed, papal themed.
In DuPont Circle, people can sink their teeth into a juicy Pope-themed menu item at one watering hole.
Rumors serving up a Pope sandwich.
We marinate the chicken in chimichurri, grill it, then we top it all with some provolone cheese, put a little bit of arugula, and holy relish salsa.
In what's perhaps a match made in heaven, Rumors teamed up with a former regular customer turned priest to dream up the idea of the sandwich and donate 50% of the proceeds to Catholic charities. Whether you plan to head downtown for some of Pope Francis' scheduled events or just live in the area, Ella's Wood-Fired Pizza is serving up some unique pies and delicious libations.
We came up with a Pope Pizza special, and it emulates the Vatican flag. And we came up with a few cocktails as well.
A Prosecco grappa. We infused it with some rosemary. And we've got a tomato juice that's also infused in rosemary, salt, and a little bit of horseradish. There we have it, the Holy Mary.
Interesting. Smart when you really think about it. Creative. They knew that press release where they announced those things, we're going to get them a segment. We're going to get them a little airtime. And guess what? It got them airtime in Phoenix. It was that good of a story, because here we are. One of the most interesting Pope-related events that took place today, personally, I felt was his meeting President Obama. So I have some of that for you. Would you like to watch that with me? I hope so. I'm seeing that some of you weren't in the chat room for all of our Pope coverage today. So hopefully that means you won't mind spending a little time revisiting this with us. One thing I will say about our Pope coverage is we're getting it from Fox National, and they have done a beautiful job cutting and editing in real time. So I feel like all of our Pope coverage looks really sharp and beautiful thanks to Fox National, thanks to some of these feeds we're getting. Let's take a look at the Pope meeting with President Obama earlier today.
Ladies and gentlemen, the national anthem of the Holy See, followed by the national anthem of the United States.
Troop in review. Order! Order! Push! Flag! Order! Order! Flag! Order! Flag! Ready! Cut!
Good morning. What a beautiful day the Lord has made. Holy Father, on behalf of Michelle and myself, welcome to the White House. I should explain that our backyard is not typically this crowded. But the size and the spirit of today's gathering is just a small reflection of the deep devotion of some 70 million American Catholics. It reflects as well the way that your message of love and hope has inspired so many people across our nation and around the world. So on behalf of the American people, it is my great honor and privilege to welcome you to the United States of America. Today we mark many firsts. Your Holiness, you've been celebrated as the first Pope from the Americas. This is your first visit to the United States. And you are also the first pontiff to share an encyclical through a Twitter account. Holy Father, your visit not only allows us, in some small way, to reciprocate the extraordinary hospitality that you extended to me at the Vatican last year, it also reveals how much all Americans, from every background and every faith, value the role that the Catholic Church plays in strengthening America. From my time working in impoverished neighborhoods with the Catholic Church in Chicago, to my travels as president, I have seen firsthand how every single day Catholic communities, priests, nuns, laity are feeding the hungry, healing the sick, sheltering the homeless, educating our children, and fortifying the faith that sustains so many. And what is true in America is true around the world. From the busy streets of Buenos Aires to the remote villages in Kenya, Catholic organizations serve the poor, minister to prisoners, build schools, build homes, operate orphanages and hospitals. And just as the Church has stood with those struggling to break the chains of poverty, the Church so often has given voice and hope to those seeking to break the chains of violence and oppression. And yet I believe the excitement around your visit, Holy Father, must be attributed not only to your role as Pope, but to your unique qualities as a person. In your humility, your embrace of simplicity, in the gentleness of your words, in the generosity of your spirit, we see a living example of Jesus' teachings, a leader whose moral authority comes not just through words, but also through deeds. You call on all of us, Catholic and non-Catholic alike, to put the least of these at the center of our concerns. You remind us that in the eyes of God, our measure as individuals and our measure as a society is not determined by wealth or power or station or celebrity, but by how well we hew to Scripture's call to lift up the poor and the marginalized. To stand up for justice and against inequality, and to ensure that every human being is able to live in dignity, because we are all made in the image of God. You remind us that the Lord's most powerful message is mercy. And that means welcoming the stranger with empathy and a truly open heart. From the refugee who flees war-torn lands to the immigrant who leaves home in search of a better life. It means showing compassion and love for the marginalized, and the outcast, to those who've suffered and those who've caused suffering and seek redemption. You remind us of the costs of war, particularly on the powerless and defenseless, and urge us toward the imperative of peace. Holy Father, we are grateful for your invaluable support of our new beginning with the Cuban people, which holds out the promise of better relations between our countries, greater cooperation across our hemisphere, and a better life for the Cuban people. We thank you for your passionate voice against the deadly conflicts that ravage the lives of so many men, women, and children, and your call for nations to resist the sirens of war and resolve disputes through diplomacy. You remind us that people are only truly free when they can practice their faith freely. Here in the United States, we cherish religious liberty. It was the basis for so much of what brought us together. And here in the United States, we cherish our religious liberty, but around the world at this very moment, children of God, including Christians, are targeted and even killed because of their faith. Believers are prevented from gathering at their places of worship. The faithful are imprisoned, and churches are destroyed. So we stand with you in defense of religious freedom and interfaith dialogue, knowing that people everywhere must be able to live out their faith free from fear and free from intimidation. And Holy Father, you remind us that we have a sacred obligation to protect our planet, God's magnificent gift to us. We support your call to all world leaders to support the communities most vulnerable to changing climates and to come together to preserve our precious world for future generations. Your Holiness, in your words and deeds, you set a profound moral example. And in these gentle but firm reminders of our obligations to God and to one another, you are shaking us out of our complacency. All of us may at times experience discomfort, contemplate the distance between how we lead our daily lives and what we know to be true, what we know to be right. But I believe such discomfort is a blessing, for it points to something better. You shake our conscience from slumber. You call on us to rejoice in good news and give us confidence that we can come together in humility and service and pursue a world that is more loving, more just, and more free. Here at home and around the world, may our generation heed your call to never remain on the sidelines of this march of living hope. For that great gift of hope, Holy Father, we thank you and welcome you with joy and gratitude to the United States of America.
Good morning. Mr. President, I'm deeply grateful for your welcome in the name of the All Americans. As the son of an immigrant family, I'm happy to be a guest in this country, which was largely built by such families. I look forward to these days of encounter and dialogue, in which I hope to listen to and share many of the hopes and dreams of the American people. During my visit, I will have the honor of addressing Congress, where I hope, as a brother of this country, to offer words of encouragement to those called to guide the nation's political future in fidelity to its founding principles. I will also travel to Philadelphia for the 8th World Meeting of Families to celebrate and support the institutions of marriage and the family at this a critical moment in the history of our civilization. Mr. President, together with their fellow citizens, American Catholics are committed to building a society which is truly tolerant and inclusive, to safeguarding the rights of individuals and communities, and to rejecting every form of injustice, discrimination. With countless other people of goodwill, they are likewise concerned that efforts to build a just and wisely ordered society respect their deepest concerns and the right to religious liberty. That freedom remains one of America's most precious possessions. And as my brothers, the United States bishops, have reminded us, all are called to be vigilant, precisely as good citizens, to preserve and defend that freedom from everything that would threaten or compromise it. Mr. President, I find it encouraging that you are proposing an initiative for reducing air pollution. Accepting the urgency, it seems clear to me also that climate change is a problem we can no longer be left to a future generation. When it comes to the care of our common home, we are living at a critical moment of history. We still have time to make the change needed to bring about a sustainable and integral development, for we know that things can change. Such change demands on our part a serious and responsible recognition not only of the kind of the world we may be leaving to our children, but also to the millions of people living under a system which has overlooked them. Our common home has been part of this group of the excluded, which cries out to heaven and which today powerfully strikes our homes, our cities, our societies. To use a telling phrase of the Reverend Martin Luther King, we can say that we have defaulted on a promissory note, and now is the time to honor it. We know by faith that the Creator does not abandon us. He never forsakes His loving plan or repents of having created us. Humanity has the ability to work together in building our common home. As Christians, inspired by this certainty, we wish to commit ourselves to the conscious and responsible care of our common home. Mr. President, the efforts which were recently made to mend broken relationships and to open new doors to cooperation within our human family represent positive steps along the path of reconciliation, justice, and freedom. I would like all men and women of goodwill in this great nation to support the efforts of the international community to protect the vulnerable in our world and to stimulate integral and inclusive models of development. So that our brothers and sisters everywhere may know the blessings of peace and prosperity which God wills for all His children. Mr. President, once again, I thank you for your welcome. And I look forward to these days, your country. God bless America.
Ladies and gentlemen, the St. Augustine Gospel Choir from Washington, D.C.
Flag! Harry! Flag! Halt! Ready! Up!
Mr. President, this concludes the ceremony.
And if you watched our first, well, the first ever, here, let me go back here while they're still on. If you watched our afternoon coverage of the Mass, the first Mass in the United States, you saw a familiar face in presidential candidate Jeb Bush. He attended. I also believe I heard that Joe Biden was planning to attend, but I don't know if I actually saw him there. We did see Jeb Bush, however.
Ashley, are they running discs again?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Please exit the lawn via the southeast gate.
All right, guys, that concludes our coverage of the welcome ceremony.
Thanks, Samya. It was a Samya sighting. The reason for my Jeb Bush mention was not just, well, this is interesting. Why isn't it starting at the beginning of a speech? I'm not having that. Some of these are edited funny, so give me a second. Well, I suppose I don't have it at the very beginning. I'm sorry. But let's take a look. This is video of Jeb Bush at the Heritage Actions Take Back America Presidential Forum. You saw every presidential candidate except for Donald Trump at this event on Friday. This, I guess, was their way to make up for anything that they said or wish they had said at the debate just days before CNN's debate. It was everyone's first appearance except for Trump's post-debate, and it was really their way to kind of catch up on anything that they were criticized about, or if they missed anything they didn't get to make a point they wanted to make. This gave them a unique opportunity to do that. And here's Mr. Jeb, who they said in an interesting poll I saw today, you know, there are all these, everybody's got a poll, but in one recent poll, and I'm sorry that I'm spacing on the source, they said, realistically, who do you see being your president? And Donald Trump was one of the lowest on that list, but Hillary Clinton and Jeb were one of the highest, which I thought was very interesting.
States, communities.
Oh, but I will, hi, I'm back. I will also say that one of the reasons that they are seen as actually people that people can see in the White House, more likely to be in the White House, is because we've had a Bush or a Clinton in the White House already and in cycles for so long. So it's just, the buyers have no imagination. They've already seen these individuals kind of in this environment, so obviously they're going to say yes. It's easier to imagine these people in the White House.
Eliminate state and local tax deductions. So small government states, communities like South Carolina and Florida, aren't subsidizing California and New York and Illinois. This is the way you do it. You shift power back to families, back to communities, to let them make decisions. In the case of Florida, when we did this, our economy grew at 4.4%, about double the rate that we're living with now. We had 4.4% growth. Government grew at half that rate. We were one of 2 states to become AAA bond rated. Compare that to the sorry state of affairs in Washington, D.C., where for the first time in American history, we had a credit downgrade. You can do this if you're serious about applying conservative principles across the board, and that's what I did. I was a disruptor in Tallahassee, and I'll be a disruptor in Washington, D.C. We need a line item veto power for the government. They called me Veto Corleone when I was governor of Florida, for good reason, because I vetoed 2,500 separate line items in the budget, totaling $2 billion. We need to have a balanced budget amendment. Every time a lobbyist meets with an elected official in Washington, there ought to be, in 24 hours, there ought to be some notice of it. If an elected official doesn't show up to work, they ought to have their pay deducted like everybody else in America. You can change the culture, and then you can start fixing the big things that are holding us back. How we tax, how we regulate, embracing the energy revolution, fixing the things that will allow us to grow at a rate that will lift everybody's spirits.
Governor Bush, let's stick on the issue of spending. Over the last 15 years, the federal budget has doubled from $1.9 trillion to this year an estimated $3.8 trillion. Can you commit that as president, the size of government relative to the economy will shrink under your presidency? And specifically with regards to the discretionary budget, are there any specific programs that you'd cut?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think we ought to shift as much of these things, block grant them back to the states. So the biggest non-discretionary, so-called non-discretionary spending, by the way, Mike, why do we call these things discretionary and non-discretionary to start with? That's kind of a trap to begin with, isn't it? Shouldn't we have a family budget in Washington, D.C.? Shouldn't we start with the notion that you take what you have, you spend what you have? The budget in Washington that starts like this, that's the base budget. It grows automatically. Maybe we should have a zero-based budgeting approach where there is no difference between discretionary and non-discretionary. So here's the idea. Medicaid, one of the largest spending items in the federal budget. It's non-discretionary because it's an entitlement. Fine. Why don't we block grant it back to the states? Let Governor Haley pick how she wants to create an insurance program for the poor. In Florida, I did that. We said we'll take this money at a far lower rate of growth, 2% instead of 6 or 7%, and we created our own Medicaid program that the beneficiaries liked a lot more. They got to choose plans. They got benefits when they could take the premium and go to a private provider. If they made the healthy lifestyle decisions, they got additional monies to continue to do healthy lifestyle things. And the net result was we saved a lot of money for the government, outcomes were better, and people had choices and they were empowered to make those kind of choices. That's the better approach. Across the board, we should be doing that. But there's a lot of programs inside of Washington that don't need to go back to. They ought to be eliminated. The EDA, there's a whole alphabet soup of things inside of the Department of Commerce. It worked maybe 50, 60, 70 years ago, but in this dynamic economy that we're living in, we don't have to have government support for economic development. It's kind of an oxymoron. All of the Department of Energy grants for trying to pick winners and losers in the energy market, that really worked out well. Solyndra and every other one, we should eliminate all of that kind of spending and focus on frankly, if you had to pick the one thing, and I hope you guys support this, in South Carolina, the most veteran-friendly state other than maybe Florida, I hope that you would say that we need to support our veterans and support our military and support our counterintelligence capabilities. That is where we should be spending our money and reforming the things that create the huge out-year cost, our entitlement problems, and then all the rest of it should be challenged in a zero-based budgeting kind of way. That's what I think is the proper approach to doing this. And wherever possible, let's apply the 10th Amendment again the right way. Let's shift power back to the states and let them decide how they build their roads, how they educate their kids, how they provide social welfare system around the people that truly need it.
Governor Bush, on several of the things you just mentioned, you might find that actually there's some people within your own party, especially in Washington, D.C., who disagree with you. What issue do you think, if you were elected president, you would most come in conflict with the Republican Party over?
I can't, the microphone,
What issue do you think you would most find yourself in conflict with congressional Republicans of your own party in as president?
I don't know. I think people are quite comfortable with the old order there, and there's be a lot of disruption. Some of the things I just described might come in conflict. The Ex-Im Bank is an example of this. It may have worked in the past, but again, we're in a different era. Our economy is different. We need to create a dynamic world. We don't have to have, and we need to tear down the barriers. The large businesses are going to do fine. What we need to do is to eliminate the barriers so that smaller businesses can disrupt and innovate and challenge. And I want my party to be on the side of the disruptors, not on the side of the incumbents. So there will be people that support because of large corporations in their districts and things like that. They might be supportive of that. But the simple fact is, with presidential leadership, people will move in the direction of what a president does. And we've had, for the last 6.5 painful years, we've had a president that has only tried to divide us, that doesn't believe in entrepreneurial capitalism, that believes that the progressive agenda from the top down works far better than the indigenous kind of organic way that America's always done better from the bottom up. But a president that comes committed to that believes in the future of our country, in a free society, people pursuing their dreams with a vengeance, believes in free market economics, I think there'll be lots of people that will follow. And we should have that kind of discussion now. I mean, there are people that have been elected to Congress who have done a good job fighting President Obama, but they've never actually passed a law. They've never done anything because there's abject gridlock, and that's quite dangerous. Look at the governors as the place to see how it should work. Governors that have Republican legislatures, governors that have mixed legislatures, and what you find is, because they have a balanced budget requirement, first and foremost, they have to pass a budget. And if you have to pass a budget, you have to prioritize. We should have that as a first priority, and every state in this country ought to be passing a balanced budget amendment. If the Washington won't do it, let's have a constitutional convention to do it. If you had that, it would force everybody to forge consensus on how to find it. It wouldn't force raising taxes for those that are concerned about that. Not with me as president and Republicans in Congress. We're not going to raise taxes. We should be lowering taxes and reforming it to eliminate all of the carve-outs and the things that protect the incumbents. We could be growing at 4% per year, as far as the eye can see, if we applied the same principles that allowed us to grow at 4% per year when we were doing it. We haven't lost our ability to do it. We just haven't applied the right policies to make it happen, and that's what we should be focused on. I'm having a hard time hearing you here.
Governor Bush, let's talk now about what you call the right to rise and religious liberty. You spoke at the Liberty University commencement address, and that you said with regard to the religious liberty, there's a choice between the Little Sisters of the Poor and Big Brother. And in your 1990s book, Profiles in Character, you said that one of the causes of America's social regression can be traced to the collapse of civil society, those institutions, the family, church, that instill virtue. Can you talk about what you think the job of a president is vis-a-vis promoting religious liberty, civil society, and virtue?
Absolutely. This is if you talk about bottom-up politics, a bottom-up society rather than a top-down society, you start with the institution of family. Because without that, the demands on government become overwhelming. Today in America, 42% of all the babies brought into the world today will be out of wedlock. A mom will be there, of course, but the dad may be part of the life, but is not the husband of the mom, and may not be living there. A quarter of all children born today don't know who their dads, has no relationship with their dad. And the net result of this, as we've seen this play out, is a dramatic change in our society, and the demands that exist because of this are overwhelming. If we want to get back to a society that is loving and compassionate and caring, I think reorganizing family life, recognizing that single moms are heroic in their efforts, that we should respect the fact that it is difficult to do this, but we ought to figure out ways to make sure that men can be involved in their child's life and men be reconnected with the moms that are struggling. And we don't do that today. So how would we do it? Well, first, as a president, you lead. You talk about this in a way that is loving and draws people towards the cause of traditional family life being important. Secondly, you eliminate all of the barriers that exist right now in our welfare system for men to be engaged. Effectively, if you're an intact family, you can't receive the benefits. And the net result is that it basically perpetuates this. You trap people. Thirdly, we have a marriage penalty in our tax code. If someone wants to work as a spouse, the highest rate that they pay is the first dollar that they earn because they're part of their spouse's income. We should eliminate the marriage penalty by allowing spouses to have their own single filing, which would create a lot of economic opportunity and vitality in families. And as it relates to religious freedom, clearly the president has to express a view and fight for the view that conscience is what religious freedom is about, not just going to church, as Hillary Clinton says, or just having a view of faith in your house, but acting on your sense of consciousness matters. Being in the public square, using the teachings of your Creator to be able to improve the human condition, to act on your faith, is something that is part of our heritage as a country. And there are people on the left that want to push that away, and they're using the courts to try to do so. I, for one, believe that a tolerant big country like ours needs to protect religious freedom and religious conscience. It is the first freedom of our Constitution. And I think a great majority of Americans believe with that. I think 3/4 of Americans, if you express it the way I just did, will embrace that idea. And politics ought to be about that, drawing people towards our cause, having a conversation with them to believe like we believe that these things truly, truly matter.
Governor Bush, final question before Governor Haley comes up. Many demand cheap energy, but are unwilling to see its production in their own state. When you were governor of Florida, you supported a drilling moratorium off the coast of Florida. Our next question actually comes from Twitter, and they ask that you please provide details regarding energy.
Sure. Well, as it relates to the offshore drilling moratorium that existed in Florida, it was interesting because, and Governor Haley will appreciate this. For 8 years, I opposed the drilling, and off the coast by 100 miles, because we have, no disrespect, Governor, we have some pretty nice beaches. And you got to balance the economic interests with the environmental concerns, and that's what I did. No one ever came to my office and said, hey, the dangerous thing is to be 230 miles off the coast, where you have deeper waters. That creates a bigger challenge. So that's a lesson learned. But the simple fact is that governors ought to have the right to decide these things. And in South Carolina, if you want to drill off the coast, fine. In Florida, if Governor Scott doesn't want to do it, fine. This should be a decision jointly made by the federal government and the states. But if the states are totally opposed to this, they ought to have the right to be able to not allow it to happen. And as it relates to energy in general, I think we could be energy secure within 5 years with North American resources. That means approving the XL pipeline, for one. That means wherever there is this consensus to expand leases on federal lands and federal waters, which right now there's been a dramatic decline in. That means having a tax code where you fully depreciate all investment in the first year to create a massive expenditure in our own country, creating a renaissance in energy. That means totally focusing on this where natural gas is used in a very different, in all sorts of ways to expand its consumption because it's the lowest cost, most abundant source of energy in the world. If we do that, and it means also that we eliminate the export ban, so that we export our oil to use it as a national security tool, and it frankly lowers our costs here by doing that. And it creates high-wage jobs and hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in the real economy. Our energy sector is the one hope we have to be able to create a stronger and safer America and create high sustained economic growth at a far faster rate. And that's what we should be doing. We ought to be figuring out, how do we create 4% growth? How do we lift people out of poverty? How do we create higher wages for the great middle of our country instead of declining disposable income? The energy sector is a place where that will happen more often than not.
Thank you, and I have to tell everyone that Jeb is, I consider, a very dear friend, and the reason I do is because when I was Nikki Who running for governor and no one knew who I was, I saw him at this candidate forum, and I said, I don't even have 3% of the polls. No one will support me. I can't pick up the phone and no one will answer. And he said, get out of the office. Quit listening to the consultants. Shake every hand and tell them what you care about. And he made it all about grassroots. And for that, I will forever be thankful. So thank you very, very much. So Jeb has been one of those other governors that's been great to ask advice to. And South Carolina has not always been at the top and is still struggling when it comes to education. And so I had called him and said, what advice can you save me? Because he was one of the first governors to acknowledge education, but a conservative governor to acknowledge education. He said you need reading coaches. He said you need technology. And above all, don't pass any kids that can't read by the 3rd grade. Jeb, the reason I want to bring this up is because I think there's also, as much as we've worked together on education, South Carolinians have had an issue with Common Core.
Yep.
And so I'd like to ask you, explain to us what your thought process was through Common Core and where you see it going.
Well, Common Core was started after I left as governor. I'm for higher standards, and Common Core standards are higher than the standards that exist. And so if South Carolina, hang on a second, let me finish. You're going to like the ending of this story, come on. If South Carolina wants to get out of Common Core standards, great. Just make sure the standards that you apply are higher than the ones you had before you had Common Core. The standards matter. Accountability matters around them matters. School choice matters. It's the whole approach. No standards would yield bad results, and that's what we have. In South Carolina and Florida, about a third of our kids are college and or career ready. Here's what I'm not for. What I'm not for is the federal government having any say about any aspects of content, curriculum, or standards. This should be a South Carolina decision. And here's the results, Governor. When we did this, when we applied higher standards prior to Common Core, robust accountability, the most ambitious school choice programs in the country, when we eliminated social promotion in third grade, which is what we did, Florida has led the nation in learning gains. It's a fact. Our kids have grown at a faster rate in terms of their learning than any. We started at a low base. We were 50th out of 50 in graduation rate. We're now at the national average. African American kids, low-income kids, kids with learning disabilities, Hispanic kids, all kids in Florida have seen greater gains than any other state in the country. It is a fact. So accountability and standards along with school choice matters. It matters what kids are learning. If you have low expectations for kids, you'll get that result. Do you think it's appropriate that a third of our kids are college and or career ready when they graduate from high school? It is shameful. We need to elevate this debate to get to the point where it really matters. If kids are not ready to go to college or get a job by the time we finish high school, what's their life going to look like? What kind of life will they have? A life of purpose and meaning? I don't believe so. And so this should be a priority, as it is with Governor Haley and any governor. This should be their first priority, to assure that you transform the system to make sure that children are ready to go pursue their dreams as they see fit. And our country is lagging behind. We are 15th in the world right now in terms of college attainment rates. We were number one just 20 years ago. Who's fooling who?
Well, and I think, Jeb, that's the reason we care about it, is because we're trying to do all these Made in America jobs. But we want our kids doing them. We want to make sure that our kids can do this. So when it comes to issues that governors face, and I appreciate it because you've been a governor, you know what it's like to have Washington push on you. When it comes to health care, when it comes to education, when it comes to regulations, will you allow states to make those decisions first, or will you try and push those through by the federal government?
You know what the answer to that is? So on education, I'll give you an example. Instead of imposing anything on states on how to do things, if you wanted to create the largest, like Nevada just did the ESA, Education Savings Account, largest voucher program if it's fully implemented in the country. Every child can go to a private school. Their parents can send their kids to a private school, irrespective of income. It's a big darn deal. If they could take the monies that go to Title I monies for low-income kids and ESE monies for the learning disabled kids and the early childhood monies, education monies, and send that down as a block grant to Brian Sandoval, the governor of Nevada, he should have that right to take that money and expand these state-driven programs because they're going to yield rising student achievement. And if you want to do the same thing, you should have that flexibility. The government ought to give you that flexibility. And when I'm elected president, that's exactly what I will propose. Liberate this stuff. This woman here knows more about education than anybody in Washington, D.C. And that's what we should be focusing on, supporting the reformers in our country and trust people in the states to be able to do what they know how to do.
Last thing I want to ask, just on a personal note. On one side, you look and this entire arena loves your family, and is so thankful for the service that they've given to our... How, personally, for you, how hard has it been to have to be part of this beloved family, but yet also watch your family get criticized and separate yourself from all of that?
Well, I'm used to the criticism because I've watched my dad and my brother be president, and they got the bark scraped off of them every day by the left. That's what they did. That's how they roll. The left just demonizes everybody because their ideas are dead. Have you seen an interesting idea from the left recently? So what do? They demonize. I'm used to this. That's not a problem at all. I'm totally comfortable with that. My challenge and my not dilemma at all, but my opportunity is to share the Jeb story. It's one of accomplishment as it relates to being a governor. I don't have to talk about things. I don't have to file an amendment and call it success. I'm not going to say what I've done and not back it up with anything. I got to be governor like you, which means I cut taxes. I shrunk the government workforce by 11%. I turned the whole system upside down. We created the most meaningful reforms in education. We privatized the child welfare system. You go across the board in terms of policy, and people look to Florida. That story, combined with my policies that I want to bring to the country going forward and the reforms that Washington needs, is my path to success.
And thank you for always being helpful as we go forward. Everybody give it up for Governor
Thank you, guys.
Jeb Bush.
Enjoy the night.
Such a beautiful stage they had set up at that event. I've got some other characters from this event for you as well. Let me see. Let's see. How is this edited? Because I see Dr. Carson, but I'm looking for Ted Cruz. Some of you saw a few minutes of Dr. Carson on Friday, but we were interrupted by that I-10 shooter. Breaking news on Friday. Very thankful. Hopefully they've got the right guy, but that was unreal. A very intense experience. This is video of Dr. Carson, but we are going to lead into Ted Cruz. So know that we are headed in that direction now.
The world has ever known. It is such an exceptional nation. And you know, before America came on the scene, for thousands of years, people did things the same way. Once we were on the scene, within 200 years, men were walking on the moon. And when people say we're not exceptional, they are not thinking. We are by far the most exceptional nation, and our job is to make sure that we remain an exceptional nation. And
Dr. Carson, our nation's debt picture is concerning. You yourself have noted that by some estimates, the federal government's debts accrue to $200 trillion. Yet you've also downplayed the need to address our entitlement programs, suggesting, quote, we shouldn't even talk about entitlement programs until we fix the economy. Many people feel our nation is on the verge of our own debt crisis. Dr. Carson, can we afford to delay entitlement reform before we face a catastrophic debt crisis of our own?
well, you know, one of the things that I learned as a surgeon is that when people have complex problems, you have to address them sequentially, and it has to be in the right sequence. Otherwise, you will not have a successful outcome. Now, we have a terribly broken system right now. You know, we're not growing anymore. This is the most powerful economic engine that the world has ever known. And yet, it cannot work because it has been wrapped up with chains of regulation. And they come out every month, more and more regulations. Every single regulation costs us in terms of goods and services. It costs everybody. But who does it hit disproportionately? It hits poor people disproportionately. And that's one of the things that's driving the income gap that the left is always talking about. They say you can solve that by taking all the money from the rich. No, you can solve it by stopping all these stupid regulations that are driving up the cost for everybody. And you have to recognize that, yes, we have this tremendous debt, and $18 trillion. To pay that back at $10 million a day, it would take you over 5,000 years. We're putting that on the backs of our young people, but that's not the worst part. The worst part is the fiscal gap, the unfunded liabilities that we owe. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, governmental programs versus what we expect to bring in revenues from taxes and other revenue sources. If we're fiscally responsible, those things should be almost identical. But if they're not, there's a gap. Bring that forward to today's dollars, and you're talking a fiscal gap of over $200 trillion. The only reason we can sustain that is because we can print money, because we are the reserve currency of the world, a title that generally goes with the #1 economy in the world, which we were from the 1870s until last year when China became the #1 economy. Fortunately, they don't have the infrastructure to be able to become the reserve currency right now, but they are working on it. But here we are printing money irresponsibly. We decoupled it from the gold standard in 1971. It's just based on our good name, faith, and credit, which is not very good anymore. And if we no longer can print money and we continue down this pathway, we are headed for certain destruction. And what we must do is get our fiscal house in order, get the economy rolling again, fix the tax structure so that it can be roaring, providing excellent opportunities for people. And once we have excellent opportunities for people, that's when we reform the entitlements. That way, we have everybody on the same page and we're not persecuting people and making ourselves seem unfair.
Dr. Carson, do you anticipate in your first term proposing Medicare, Social Security reforms? Will you get the economy growing quickly enough that we can then move on to that next part of the sequence and reform entitlements in your first term?
There are a lot of people who say, you know, it took us years and years to get into this bad situation, and it's going to take us years and years to get out of it. I do not believe that. I believe that if we get in there and rapidly get rid of all of these horrible entitlements, and not horrible entitlements, but horrible regulations, we'll get rid of the entitlements too, but we have to do this in sequence. Get rid of the regulations, and we reform the tax system. We get rid of these horrible situations, and one of the ways that we can jumpstart the economy very quickly, there's trillions of dollars, at least $2 trillion overseas, that's not being brought back here. I can remember many an afternoon sitting around boardroom tables, and a lot of people don't know, but you know, I sat on the Kellogg board for 18 years, Costco board for 16 years. I was the chairman of the board of Vaccinogen, a biotech company. My wife and I built a national scholarship program that has won national awards. I have a lot of business experience. People think that doctors only know medicine. They're nuts, okay? But we would talk about all that money overseas and what we could do with it here, but we couldn't bring it back because the corporate tax rate was too high. Well, my suggestion, and what I would advocate if I got into office, is I would provide a 6-month hiatus of tax-free holiday so that that money could be repatriated into our shores at no cost to the American people. And my only requirement would be that 10% of it would be used to create jobs for people who are unemployed and on welfare. You want to talk about a gigantic jumpstart. That would be unbelievable. And there would be the biggest stimulus probably since the New Deal. And yet, it would be something that didn't cost our taxpayers 1 red cent. Those are the kinds of things that we have to be thinking about. That's low-hanging fruit, absolutely no reason not to do something like that. And then we have to fix the tax structure for everybody. I want something that hits everybody in a proportional way. And if that was good enough for God, that's good enough for me too. And it should be good enough for all of us.
Dr. Carson, it's an honor to invite Governor Haley back onto the stage.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and happy birthday, Dr. Carson.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You know, I will tell you, in case you didn't know, South Carolina was named the friendliest state in the country, but you could tell when they sang you happy birthday.
Absolutely.
So they never let me down. You know, a lot of people have watched you and they hear what a conservative you are. But will you go back and tell so many of these people actually what your upbringing was? Because you weren't always a conservative.
No. You know, I grew up in Detroit and in Boston. I mean, you want to talk about blue places. If there was another color beyond blue, they would be that. And I grew up in that. And then I went to Yale University. You know, my goodness, talk about liberal. And then came back to the University of Michigan, and then went to Baltimore. I mean, so I was a radical Democrat, and I believed all of the stuff that they believed, including that Republicans were horrible, racist people. And then I started listening to Ronald Reagan, and he didn't sound that way. And I said, this man does not sound like that. And then at the same time, I was seeing all these patients coming in, and they were able-bodied people, but they were completely subsumed by the welfare system. And I said, this is not working in their favor. And it's one of the things that I'm trying to get a lot of the downtrodden in our society to recognize. There are ways that you can get out of a state of dependency. Not listen to those people who are always patting you on the head and saying, there, you poor little thing, I'm gonna take care of all your needs. That's not being kind.
And I absolutely agree. In a time where we're trying to bring more people into our party, what are we not doing right, and what can we do more of?
Well, there is no question we need to listen.
That's right.
And you know, one of the things that we do in this country is we've gotten into our respective corners and we fire hand grenades at each other. And it helps to facilitate what the left is trying to do. They're trying to divide us. They want us to think that there's a war on women and racial wars and income wars and age wars and religious wars, and they want us all to believe that we're each other's enemies, when in fact they are the enemy. And that's what we need to understand. And we need to go out into the minority communities and show them that there is a ladder of opportunity that will bring them out of a state of dependency. And we want them to use the talents that God has given them, working hard. We want to invest in our fellow man, because it is our job to take care of the downtrodden. It is not the job of the government. We can do it a lot better than they can.
Talking about different places and things, you practiced at Johns Hopkins, and so you know Baltimore. If you look at what happened in South Carolina and in Charleston, and you look at what happened there, what could have been or should have been done differently to cause a different reaction in Baltimore than what we saw?
Okay, well, you know, it was a story that was really missed by the media because they were looking for sensationalism, and they wanted to talk about the flag, and they wanted to talk about everything else. But in fact, the people at that church demonstrated the Spirit of God. It's the thing that made America great. You know? And that's what we need to emphasize more in our nation. You know, the president likes to say that we're not a Judeo-Christian nation, but he doesn't get to decide what kind of nation we are. We get to decide what kind of nation we are. And I think if we apply those kind of principles in Baltimore, in Ferguson, wherever we are, reaching out to our fellow man with Christ-like attitude, I think we'll be in much better shape. And I got to tell you, you know, I get a little bit tired of the secular progressives always trying to tell me that, you know, you're not a good scientist, you're not a good doctor because you believe that God created the earth and stuff like this. Let me tell you, it's supposed to be live and let live. And we are, you know, believing in God, think about this, it's on our money, it's in our founding document, many courtrooms on the wall it says, "In God we trust." It's in every part of our fabric. If we can't talk about it, what is that? In medicine, we call that schizophrenia. And we can do much better than that.
So we're going a little bit over, but I want to ask just one more question. Everybody sees you as America's surgeon. Everybody wants you to be their surgeon. What do you want to say to them to make you America's president?
Well, I want America to recognize that this was not something that was on my bucket list of things to do. Okay? I was looking to retire. My wife was looking for that too. But after the prayer breakfast in 2013, you know, so many of you begin to say that this is something that I should consider. And I finally just said, Lord, if you want me to do this, all of the pundits say it's impossible, that you can't put together an organization, you can't raise the money, which really was quite a relief to me. But I said, I said, if you want me to do it, you open the doors. And if you open the doors, I will walk through them. And as long as they stay open, I will continue to do so, because I want the American people to once again be placed at the pinnacle of this society. This is where it was designed in our country, and this is what it should be. And thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, help us thank the birthday guy, Dr. Vanguard.
Our next video comes from a senator from Texas and answers the question, what a Ted Cruz presidency would bring opportunity for all and favoritism to none.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Senator Ted Cruz.
Senator Cruz, welcome, and your first question will come from Debbie.
God bless the great state of South Carolina.
Senator Cruz, back in 2007, Barack Obama said he was running for president to tell the corporate lobbyists that their days of setting the agenda in Washington are over. Well, that obviously has not happened. You've spoken a lot about the so-called Washington cartel. How do you actually overcome its influence if Congress doesn't want to play along?
Well, that's a great question. You know, if you look at the Washington cartel, that's the term I use for career politicians in both parties that get in bed with the lobbyists and special interests and grow and grow and grow government. If we're going to break the Washington cartel, the only way to do it is we've got to take it on and we've got to bring power out of Washington and back to the people. And I'll say two things in regard to that. Number one, we've done it before. When was the last time we beat the Washington cartel? And I'll submit it was 1980, the Reagan Revolution. Now, the Washington cartel despised Ronald Reagan. And you look at what happened in the late 70s all across this country. Men and women came together from the grassroots. Many of the men and women here in this stadium rose up like a tidal wave and turned this country around. What my campaign is working to do is the same thing. Build a grassroots army here in South Carolina and across the country to take power out of Washington and bring it back to we the people. And let me make a final point on this. You know, if you look at the debate stage, whether in California or Cleveland, you see the candidates standing there. Suddenly everyone is standing up to the Washington cartel. Now, I think that's fabulous. They say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Have you noticed that the Washington establishment, they tell us over and over again, every time they run as a conservative. They run as one of us. Not a single person on that stage in California said, I'm a squishy establishment moderate, I stand for nothing. And yet they say if you're actually one of us, you can't win. They're convinced every person in this stadium is unelectable. If you're really a conservative, if you'll really stand up to Washington, you're unelectable. With a test I think we ought to apply to each of those men and women standing on the stages. That's great. You're adopting rhetoric today against Washington. If you want to be an outsider, fabulous. Show me where you stood and fought against career politicians in both parties.
Senator Cruz, in order to get things done, an effective president needs to have good relationships with Congress. Some reportedly say you don't have good relationships with members either of your party or the Democrat Party in Congress. What do you say to people who don't think a President Cruz can be effective given the atmosphere between you and your fellow senators?
Well, Michael, listen, I will agree with you. If you're looking for someone to go along to get along, if you think Washington is doing great, we need to keep going in the same direction, just kind of fiddle around the edges, then I ain't your guy. But I'm going to suggest to you we've had way too many Republicans whose number one virtue is, I get along great with Democrats. Right now, Republican leadership in Washington seems to be competing for who can surrender faster and more ostentatiously to Barack Obama. And you know, the premise that an effective president is someone who's bosom buddies with the opposing party, yeah, Freud's going to have a field day with that. I would take a minute and assess the presidency of Barack Obama. Listen, if you're a leftist, if you actually believe in socialism, if you believe in diminishing America, if you believe in statist control over our lives, Barack Obama has been the most successful leftist president in history. And last I checked, Barack Obama doesn't spend a whole lot of time spooning with congressional Republicans. If we're going to turn this around, we can't nominate or elect a Republican president who will simply manage the decline of this country. Just once, Republicans should nominate a candidate as committed to conservative principles as Barack Obama is to liberal principles.
Senator Cruz, several of the other campaigns have released very detailed health care plans about what to do after Obamacare is repealed. Some of them have a tax credit to help people buy health insurance. Some of them use a standard deduction. On a policy area as complicated as health care, the details matter. What are the details of your replacement for Obamacare?
Let's talk about it in two pieces, replacement for Obamacare. I want to talk first about getting rid of Obamacare and then its replacement. Now, why do I start with getting rid of Obamacare? Look, we've had 3 elections since Barack Obama was elected. 2 of them, 2010 and 2014, the number one issue was repealing Obamacare, and we won historic tidal wave landmark elections. In between the middle election, 2012, we sought out and nominated the one person on the planet who had actually designed and implemented a plan just like Obamacare. Literally, there are 7 billion people on the face of planet Earth. We could have walked up to anyone, we could have said, "Sir, have you designed and implemented a plan like Obamacare?" "No, you're our guy." And in 2012, we got clobbered. Now, what's happening in 2016? You know, if you look at that stage in California, those 11 candidates there, most of them never utter the words Obamacare. I promise you, if you do not campaign on repealing Obamacare, you ain't gonna repeal Obamacare. The only way we repeal it is if we take on the Washington cartel. I intend to make 2016 a referendum on repealing every word of Obamacare and adopting a simple flat tax. And that's how you break the Washington cartel. It's how you repeal Obamacare, is you come out of 2016 with a mandate from the people. How do you change the incentives of politicians in Washington? You know, there's an old joke that politics is Hollywood for ugly people. My wife says I resemble that remark. The way you break the cartel is you make it politically more risky for elected politicians to do the wrong thing than it is to do the right thing. We make this election a referendum.
Senator Cruz, can we talk about the details of your
I don't want to miss your question, Michael, so let me get to that. But it's important to start with that predicate because most of the other candidates aren't willing to fight the fight to repeal Obamacare. Now, once we repeal it, we absolutely need common sense health care reform. It needs to expand competition, it needs to empower patients, and it needs to disempower government bureaucrats from getting in between us and our doctors. And let me give 3 specific policy proposals that reflect those principles. Number 1, we need to allow people to purchase health insurance across state lines. That creates a true 50-state national marketplace. It drives down costs. If you want more access, you want more choice and lower costs. What does Obamacare do? It's less choice and higher costs. Secondly, we need to expand health savings account so people can save in a tax-advantaged way for health care needs. And third, we need to make health insurance portable, so if you lose your job, it goes with you from job to job to job.
Senator Cruz, let me ask you specifically about the tax credit proposal that some have put out there. Some conservatives, some Republicans, but think that we need a refundable tax credit to help Americans buy health insurance. Do you support a refundable tax credit as part of a replacement to Obamacare?
Michael, as you know, there have been a lot of ideas put forth by think tanks, by various thinkers in terms of replacements and tax credits. I'm open to considering using the tax code, as long as it's consistent with those principles that I laid out, empowering patients. I want the person picking your doctor to be you and not a government bureaucrat.
Senator Cruz, on Wednesday night, you said that you regretted your support of John Roberts' confirmation to the Supreme Court. We all know it can be difficult to identify and appoint judges to that court, and so one of your proposals is to have judicial retention elections as a check on those permanent appointments. Wouldn't an idea like this politicize the judiciary? Wouldn't it make them unlikely to go against majoritarian impulses?
Oh, listen, I wish it were the case that we didn't need fundamental reform of the court. If the justices were doing their jobs, if they were following the law, you wouldn't need fundamental reform, something like judicial reelection. But if you have judges behaving like politicians, making policy decisions that they have no authority under the Constitution to do, then they cannot expect to be exempt from the authority of we the people. And Michael, let me expand on this point as well, because this is a great illustration. Think about the debate this week in California. If you asked all 11 candidates, what kind of judges will you appoint to the court? Every one of them would stand up and say, I will appoint strict constructionists who won't legislate from the bench. They'll say that word for word. Those are the talking points every one of their campaigns has given them. Every Republican has said that for 40 years. Let's look at the record. You know, Democrats have batted almost 1,000 when it comes to Supreme Court nominees. Every Supreme Court nominee they put forward votes like a radical leftist nutcase. Republicans, we bat about 500. About half of Republican Supreme Court justices actually honor their oaths and defend the Constitution. The other half are screaming train wreck disasters. Earl Warren was a Republican nominee. Bill Brennan was a Republican nominee. If you remember the old Pogo cartoon, we have met the enemy, and they is us. It's important to understand how that happens. I mentioned in the debate 2 moments in time that were particularly important. Number one, in 1990, George Herbert Walker Bush had in one room David Souter, and in another room, Edith Jones, the rock-ribbed conservative on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. George Herbert Walker Bush picked David Souter. Fast forward 15 years to 2005, George W. Bush had in one room John Roberts. And in another room, my former boss, Mike Ludig, the rock-ribbed conservative on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, a man who was Justice Scalia's very first law clerk. George W. Bush picked John Roberts. Now, it's worth understanding why they did it. It's not that they were secretly desiring, I want some big government liberal. It's that both David Souter and John Roberts, they didn't have a paper trail. They'd lived their whole lives. They've never written or said anything to prove they were a conservative. And both President Bushes said, gosh, if we nominate a conservative, we'll have a fight. The Democrats will oppose us, the media will criticize us, and Republicans will get nervous. So let's nominate someone who's never said or done anything to prove they're a conservative. Every time we do that, we get burned.
Senator Cruz.
And I'm going to suggest to you the difference between me and the other very, very fine men and women who are running for president is when push comes to shove, when it comes to the moment to make the decision, whether it is really taking on Obamacare, whether it is standing up to amnesty, whether it is actually defunding Planned Parenthood, or whether it is standing up and putting a principled conservative jurist on the Supreme Court, the difference between me and the other candidates is that I'm going to do what I told you I would do.
Senator Cruz, would it be fair to characterize your position then that because the left has politicized the American judiciary, we should respond in kind? And isn't that throwing in the towel on a pretty important part of the constitutional separation of powers in this country?
Michael, let's be clear. We shouldn't politicize the judiciary. Let me give an example. I'll give an example of a policy matter I care passionately about. School choice. School choice is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. We ought to be willing to fight and to go into every African American community, every Hispanic community, and say every child in America has a right to a quality education regardless of race, ethnicity, wealth, or zip code. Now, Michael, I've fought for that as a United States Senator. If I'm president, we have never seen a president fight for school choice the way that I will. But let me be perfectly clear. No Supreme Court should issue a ruling demanding school choice in every school in America. I agree with that policy position, but the place to advance that policy position is in the elected legislatures that are accountable to the people. No, our judges shouldn't be political. They should follow the Constitution.
Senator Cruz, I'm pleased to bring Governor Haley back onto the stage.
Thank you. Welcome, Senator Cruz, back to South Carolina. We welcome you.
It's a great day to be in South Carolina.
It is a great day in South Carolina. Well, I know we've had lots of fun things to talk about, but I want to go back to the fact that your family immigrated from Cuba. Mm-hmm. And this president has dramatically changed the relationship that the United States has with Cuba. What would that relationship look like under President Cruz?
Well, Governor, you're right. And what Obama has done with Cuba is actually consistent with what he's done with respect to enemies of the United States across this country. For 6.5 years, we've abandoned and alienated our friends and allies. Whether it was the United Kingdom by sending Churchill's bust back right when Obama got elected, or whether it is Israel, with this administration being the most anti-Israel administration in the history of this country. As a foreign minister of a senior ally of ours said to me, it's hard to be friends with America under this president. But at the same time, this president responds to enemies of America with weakness and appeasement, whether it is Putin, whether it is ISIS, whether it is Iran, or whether it is Fidel and Raul Castro in Cuba. What Obama's Cuba deal does is sends billions of dollars to two communist dictators that are oppressing their citizens, that are exporting terrorism across Latin America, and that are 90 miles off the coast of America. If I'm elected president, on the day I'm sworn into office, every two-bit dictator across the globe will know that the days of apologizing for America, the days of bowing and scraping to dictators, that the days of appeasing radical Islamic terrorists are over. It is worth remembering that Iran released our hostages the day Ronald Reagan was sworn into office. And if I'm elected, the world will know America is back.
Senator Ted Cruz.
You know, after being off for a few days, it is nice to come back to some political action. Although I do miss Donald Trump, I'm not going to lie to you. I miss his long-form speeches. I miss his high energy. Hopefully we'll hear from him pretty soon. He's very vocal on social media. Today he said he was boycotting Fox News, National, the programs. They responded saying that they actually canceled his appearance on the O'Reilly Factor tomorrow, and that was his reaction to them originally canceling his appearances. However, they wouldn't go into why his appearances were canceled, but he had made some critical, snarky comments about Megyn Kelly earlier that led people to believe that perhaps that's why his appearance was canceled on the O'Reilly Factor. Because keep in mind, Bill O'Reilly is who discovered Megyn Kelly and kind of helped launch her television career. So that's interesting. A little interesting gossip for you. It's 9 o'clock, which means I am going to have to wrap this program, but that for you means you get to look at John Hook and Carrie Lake now. You can head over to fox10phoenix.com/live to watch John Hook and Carrie Lake's 9 o'clock broadcast live. It's our live local television news broadcast, which is absolutely worth watching. I think you'll really enjoy it. I love John and Carrie. And then you are in for such a treat tonight because our 10 p.m. broadcast is anchored by Mark Martinez, who's typically a weekend anchor, but he's filling in for Troy right now. Great energy. If you follow him on Facebook or follow me on Twitter, you see how we determine what tie he wears every day. It takes a village. But hopefully you'll watch our 9 o'clock news broadcast. You missed the premiere of Empire if you are watching me instead of Fox 10. I prefer that you watch me, but I also love cookies, so I understand. But head on over to fox10phoenix.com and watch our 9 p.m. television news broadcast. It's local news here out of Phoenix, Arizona. You can download our app. It's free. You can receive news notifications for breaking news anytime we take you live on Fox 10 News now. We are doing extensive Pope coverage starting tomorrow morning earlier with Samya Khan. I know we have two events specifically. I think I'm going to be covering Arizona time, the afternoon event with the Pope at approximately 3:45. So if you are interested in continuous Pope coverage, we are the place to be. But we're Fox 10 News now, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. And download our app. It's free. Follow us on Twitter. Like us on Facebook. Periscope with us. Instagram with us. We're all over the place. And we want to be friends with you. Thank you so much for spending your evening with me. I greatly appreciate your time. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.